family meeting. Once a week, you bring your family together in a way where they can feel like they are upholders of the community, where they have responsibility to the community, because our kids will rise to the level of expectation that we give them, right? And same way that they'll go down to the level of, of expectation that we don't. And it starts with everybody sitting down, closed laptops, looking at each other in the eye. What's a value that we uphold in this family? Like, what's something we care about as family members? We want to be kind. We want to have humor. We want to try new things. Like, it doesn't have to be, anything big. It's just like a something that we feel is important to us. So that's the first step.
All right, welcome back to the Rich Life Lab. It's been a little bit, and I'm so excited to bring you today's guest. I have been, over the last several months, very busy with the launching of a brand new company. It's called Herden Group, and it's a premier leadership and executive coaching firm. It's something I've dreamt about for many years, and it's also something I've been incredibly passionate about for the last 20 years, really, in business. And I'm so excited to share it with the world. So if you're an founder or an executive or a leader who's looking for support in tackling what stands between you and the vision you have for your business and your life, or if you're looking to expand your own capacity for leadership so that you can be truly a beacon of elevation for everyone in your life, even more, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to learn more, you can go to Herden Group, HURDEN group.com, and check us out. We'd love to learn more about what you're trying to accomplish and figure out if and how we can help. Okay, with that, I'd love to get into today's guest, who is just amazing. I hope you love this conversation as much as I did. Her name is Laura Gassner Otting, and she is an absolute powerhouse. She's an author, a founder, a catalyst. She's an incredible keynote speaker, including her TED Talk from last year that has almost 2 million views. And she helps audiences by inspiring people to push past the doubt and indecision that keep great ideas in limbo. And she helps people to think bigger and accept greater challenges that reach beyond their current limited scope of belief. This all started many years ago when she dropped out of law school and became a presidential appointee in Bill Clinton's White House, where she helped shape AmeriCorps. She then went on to become the youngest VP of a very prominent global search firm, until years later she realized that her values were not aligned anymore with that firm. And what did she do? What all great entrepreneurs do? She founded one of the fastest growing search firms in the country, serving mission-driven leaders, until ultimately she sold that company to the same team she started it with, because like so many successful entrepreneurs, she was hungry for the next chapter, and she's found it. Since then, she has appeared regularly on Good Morning America, The Today Show. Her writing's been seen in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, HR Magazine. She's also the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of 3 books, including her most recent, Wonder Hell: Why Success Doesn't Feel Like It Should and What to Do About It. This conversation was incredibly wide-ranging. Laura has such a range in her experience, her perspective, her ideas. Her honesty and authenticity is just incredible. We talk about her perspective on a rich life and the richness of life. We talk about her ritual. Each year, she picks one word to represent and focus on for that year. We talk about the importance of having people in your life who will tell you the truth and provide a mirror to you as you pursue your goals. We talk about navigating major family transition moments, and also the power of what she calls the family meeting, which I've adopted in my own life. We describe it in detail in the episode here, but it is amazing. Amazing. We talk about the most surprising attributes of successful people. For her last book, she interviewed over 100 people, ranging from gold medal Olympians to business titans. And there were some things that stuck out that we get into. We talk about how to renegotiate your relationship with difficult and mixed emotions as you pursue your goals, your dreams. We also talk about the relationship between introversion and extroversion, and luck, and also how to engineer luck. Also how to get closer to the truth of who you are, your true self, and honestly, so much more. She tells so many stories. I mean, this episode's packed with insights and concepts and ideas. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And please share it if anyone you know needs to hear it or could be served by it. So without further ado, I bring you the Limitless, Laura Gassner Otting. Laura Gassner Otting, welcome. It is so great to see you, and I'm so grateful that you came on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, I know that you're up to all sorts of things, and I'm interested to talk about many of them. One of them, of course, is the book you've recently written, and I'm sure we'll get into that and talk more in depth about it. But I'm curious, maybe at the top, we could just talk for a second about your feelings about, you've learned so much, it seems. I know that as part of this book, you interviewed many, many people who have had success. You've had a lot of success in your own life in different ways and shapes and forms. How do you think about the concept of a rich life, which of course is something that we think about a lot here on this podcast? How would you describe that for you personally at this stage?
So I'm going to give you two answers to that. The first one is sort of my strategy of life for the last 25, 30 years, which it was actually put into words for me when I was interviewing people for my last book, Limitless. I interviewed former Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, and I can tell you the story about sort of how he came to this if you want. But what he said to me was that his entire strategy of life was to do interesting things with interesting people, and interesting opportunities would arise. So it wasn't like optimizing this and magnifying that and maximizing, the other. It was really just do interesting things with interesting people and interesting opportunities arise. And when he said that to me, I was like, oh, yeah, that's what I've been doing. So every time somebody asks me, like, what are your KPIs and what are your metrics and what are the dashboards? Like, I have all those things for my business, of course. But in terms of my life, it's a pretty simple bar to say, is this an interesting thing with an interesting person? If so, then yes. And I don't have to worry about what's going to come from it. Like richness comes out of that in all sorts of different forms. So I think, that's the first answer I would give. The second answer is that every year I pick a word, like a lot of people pick a word for the year. And this year, my word was elevation. So if I am going to launch a book, what's the elevated version of the Wonder Help book launch? If I am going to, redo my website or, rebranding or rewrite my keynotes or, spend quality time with my family, send my kids off to college, what's the elevated version of that? Like, how can I just go that extra step in all the things that I'm doing? And I thought my word for 2024 was going to be ease. Like I've elevated and now I can eat out on that for the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. But what I've decided is that my word for 24 is going to be delight, because you cannot be delighted if you're not fully present in the moment of the thing that you're doing. So I guess my sort of long answer to your question is the combination of doing interesting things with interesting people so that interesting opportunities arise, and then being delighted in the living in the moment of the elevation that we've brought to bear through that activity.
I love that. And would you say, when you pick a word or you are focused on doing interesting things with interesting people, do you ever feel like you have fallen off track? Like, do you evaluate that with any sort of process, or what does that look like?
Yes. So I was recently at a retreat with a couple of other authors and speakers with whom I, talk every week, every month. And at one point, one of them turned to me as I was sort of talking about all the work I've been doing this last year in terms of the book launch and in terms of the rebranding and everything that goes along with that. And she asked me, why are you working so hard to pursue goals that are no longer important to you, to impress people you don't like, to make money that you don't necessarily need? And I sort of stopped and I said, oh, right. Because when I started the planning, like when I turned the book into the editors, a year ago, right? It takes a year from the time it, comes out, and then started the marketing plan. I set goals. I wanted to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller. I wanted it to get in certain people's hands. I wanted to get on certain stages. I wanted to be on certain media. Like I wanted these things to happen. And I did the work to do it. And because I was in the habit of doing the work over the course of the next, there's like the 3 months of book launch. And then there were like another couple months and I'm still doing the work at that level. And she was like, stop. Like, why are you doing this? Are these still interesting things? Are these still interesting people? Are there interesting enough opportunities that are going to come out of it? Or should you stop and pause and really just sort of think about where you are, do an inventory of the opportunities that are available, and decide what you want to pursue and what you don't want to pursue? And I think what happens a lot of times is we get in the habit. Like if you're already going so fast, we get in the habit of continuing to go fast until that fast doesn't feel fast anymore and it feels normal. So then we want to go fast and we speed up and we just keep speeding up and speeding up and speeding up. And it's important to have people in your life who say, is this the speed at which you want to be going?
Mm. Yeah. So surrounding yourself with people who will give you honest feedback is a big part of it.
It can be honest feedback. It could just be a mirror, frankly, just her turning the mirror on me and saying, you set goals, you blew those goals out of the water. Amazing. Maybe that means you can kind of slow down for a little bit or reassess or pull back the throttle and just look around and decide if you still want to be going in that direction, as opposed to, if I already did that and I already blew that out of the water, maybe I should be bigger, better, faster, more, going. And so I think just somebody who can, it could be honest feedback. It could be a mirror. It could be somebody who just provides you a pause button in that space and just asks you those questions. There's one of my favorite people, the author Tasha Eurich. She's a PhD organizational psychologist and one of the top most brilliant people in the world on self-awareness. Likes to ask this question: what are you pretending not to know? And I think that is such a good question. And so when Rahaf Harfouch, another one of my favorite people, a brilliant author, asked me, why am I continuing to work so hard for these opportunities that I don't necessarily need, for people who I don't want to impress, for money I might not, have to be earning right now? That the question of what am I pretending not to know sometimes is, maybe I'm not entirely an imposter, and maybe it's okay that I'm here, and maybe I can point my head up and pat myself on the back and just be okay. Like sometimes we pretend not to know that we're actually okay. And to go back to your first question, this sort of living a rich life, I think, is not contentment and complacency, but I think it's this feeling okay with who we are, where we are when we're there.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think I've thought about this a lot. Yeah. And it's, for me personally, at the times where I'm able to notice that I'm actually feeling some discontent with some part of my life, oftentimes if I come back to is this in alignment with who I am or who I want to be at this moment or in this life? Usually as soon as I start asking those questions, it's instantly clear.
Yes.
It's, of course, this feels discontent, and there's a good reason why. And so I really appreciate that. What did you decide for yourself? Did you have an awareness after you asked that question, and did you make any changes?
Yeah, I said no to a few speaking gigs that were, they were full fee gigs. They were for great clients, but they were super inconvenient times for me right now, about to send 2 kids off, my eldest going back to his junior year of college, my youngest going to his freshman. So we're suddenly going to be empty nesters. And I'm also running a marathon in 5 weeks. And I just, it's a busy time. And I realized that there were other people who could be on that stage who would be just as good, if not better than me, for that audience in the moment and that client in the moment. And so I said no, and I sent them to somebody who would be better for them. And they were happy. I was happy. Mm-hmm. And yes, would I like to have the money? Of course. Did I need the money? No. Right. So there's the what do you want to make and what do you need to make numbers? And those are 2 very different numbers. And so in between what you need to make, right? You need to make the number to, send the kids to school, to pay your rent or your mortgage, to, take care of your, healthcare, put food on the plate, all the things that you need. And then there's the want to make number. And the want to make number is okay, if you go on vacation, are you staying in the 2-star hotel or the 5-star resort, right? Like the difference between those numbers are sort of the sacrifices that you're willing to make. And at this moment in time, for these, specific few months, I realized that I didn't need to make those sacrifices because what I was sacrificing was the time I was spending at home.
Yeah.
And this is time I just can't get back.
Yeah. How are you feeling about your son leaving? I'm curious because I have other friends in my life who are going through a similar situation. And I'm just curious.
I'm feeling melancholy at best. So I am so incredibly delighted for him. I'm so incredibly sad for me. I mean, he is, I have the great privilege of having kids that I both love and I like.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that all parents can say that. We were at a graduation party a few years ago, and one of the dads was like, can't wait to drop my kid off. We're dropping her off on September 3rd, and I'm on a plane to Italy September 4th. Can't wait to get my life back. And I was like, what's wrong with you? Like, what? Like, oh my God. Like, have you been in jail for the last 18 years with this kid in your home? Like, I'm sad, but I'm happy for him and I'm happy for us. My husband and I will be empty nesters. That's got some benefits also, but it's definitely like a moment in time. It's a bookmark or an end of a paragraph, an end of a chapter.
Right. And the beginning of a new chapter. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Some my kids are a little younger, but I know that's coming someday. And I have adopted, incidentally, we saw each other a few months ago and you were giving a talk and you mentioned on stage about doing this weekly meeting with your family. Well, yes, I have adopted that and it's amazing. Thank you. And it's incredible. Like what I've found is, and then please feel free to quickly just share this if you'd like, but what I've found is even if the family is feeling anxious on a Sunday and we're getting ready for the week and everyone's kind of charged up and the mood isn't great, when we sit down and have this meeting, by the end of it, we're laughing, we're hugging, it's beautiful. I've just been really appreciative of the transformation that can occur like just in this 45-minute conversation.
You have no idea how thrilled I am to hear that. That's so exciting. I love the family meeting. Like when I said on stage that it completely changed the cadence, the tenor, the tone of my family, I wasn't kidding. How old are your kids now?
They are 6 and 8. And so they're just in this age where they have started to really be able to engage with it.
That's the perfect time. And they're going to grow up in a home that they feel like they have some say, right? Like they're still not, they're not the leaders, right? But they can still be upholders of the community that is your home. And they will grow up with that responsibility. And I just, I'm so thrilled. Yeah. I'm so thrilled.
Thank you. And it's my daughter is actually so sweet. We've done this for several months now. And she said the other day, I have a grievance, which is one of the steps. I have a grievance. And my grievance is, I think that we should really pay attention to whether or not we're doing the things that we say we're going to do in this meeting. So she's holding us, to a standard, which is just beautiful. So I
love that. I love that. Do you want to get into the family meeting a little bit?
Yeah, let's
talk about it for people who are like, what is this magical thing that they're not telling me?
Yeah, let's run through it real quick. Yeah.
Okay, so the family meeting, as I mentioned at the keynote that you saw, it was started. I actually stole the idea from my kids' camp. So when the kids get to camp at the beginning of the summer, they have a tent meeting, and in the tent meeting, it's like 5 of them, and they talk about like who they want to be in the summer and what their values are, and the things that they want to try that they've never tried before, and what they're scared of, what they're excited about, and they sort of set like the tone for what the community of their tent is going to feel like. They're going to be brave, they're going to be strong, they're going to be vulnerable, whatever the thing is going to be. And then each week they sit down and they like revisit some of those things. Like, how are you doing on your, hope that you're going to, do the high climb this summer, or the, water ski, or whatever the thing is you're going to do. And, I know that we said we're going to be vulnerable, but I think that, maybe you could share a little bit more about this, or like whatever the things are. This sort of, it gives them the shared language. And my kids would always come home from camp just frankly better humans than I sent them to camp. And I sat down with the head of camp one year, and I was like, okay, I need to understand your magic, because whatever you're doing to parent them over these 6 or 8 weeks in the summer, I'm not doing for the other weeks of the year. And I want a piece of that because you're a better parent than me. Like, how do you do it? What is the secret? What's the magic? And he said, oh, well, it's the tent meeting. So because I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm like, you should have a giant, like a training for parents. So we actually like created this training, and we rented out like a college space on the weekends, and we like brought like 50 families in, and they did a whole training. And the training was basically this: family meeting. Once a week, you bring your family together in a way where they can feel like they are upholders of the community, where they have responsibility to the community, because our kids will rise to the level of expectation that we give them, right? And same way that they'll go down to the level of, of expectation that we don't. And it starts with everybody sitting down, closed laptops, looking at each other in the eye. What's a value that we uphold in this family? Like, what's something we care about as family members? We want to be kind. We want to have humor. We want to try new things. Like, it doesn't have to be, anything big. It's just like a something that we feel is important to us. So that's the first step. The second step is we do an airing of gratitude. We sort of go around the table and we're like, hey, I saw you got an A on that test, or I saw you got a C on that test, and awesome, because I know you were going to get an F. Like, you tried really hard. I saw the work you put in. They'll say, Mom, good job running those 10 miles this weekend. I know that was really, you've only done 8 before. That was good for you. Or thanks for setting the table. Like, just things that we notice. So an airing of gratitudes. Then there's then we go through and we do the sort of planning, just who's going to be home for dinner what night. My kids are much older than yours, so that would often include, what night are you going to pick a night to take care of dinner? So, I don't have to make dinner every night. They have responsibilities as well, even if it's sending a DoorDash group order to everybody, but just somebody else is in charge. So all the like regular logistics and the needs. All those times you're driving in the car and your kids are like, Mom, I need new cleats for the soccer game, or I need a suit for the school dance. And you're like, yeah, we'll get it. And then you get home and your phone has 15 texts and your clients are calling and the dog's thrown up on the carpet and you've totally forgotten what the thing is. And then Saturday rolls around, they're like, where are my cleats? Where are my suits? And you're like, I'm the worst parent ever. Now I just say, that'd be a great thing to bring up in family meeting. And I keep driving, and then they have agency, they have responsibility. It goes back to them. They bring it up in family meeting. Then we do long range planning, like we're going on a vacation in 3 months. Do we want to book this adventure or that restaurant, et cetera? So everybody feels like they're part of the planning and the excitement. Then we do the airing of grievances, as you mentioned. That's where shit gets real. And that's usually when they say things like, Mom, you said you were going to take responsibility for dinner on Tuesday and you didn't. And like, we were kind of scrambling around. So like, what happened? And then that's when I can say, well, I had a really busy day. Maybe I should have planned differently. Let's look at my week this week and find a less busy day for me to take dinner. And then the kids will know later, gee, Mom, it looks like you're busy unexpectedly on Wednesday. Maybe I'll take dinner instead today, right? Like, it just sort of shows them what's happening. Yeah. And it gives them an opportunity to say things like, you were mean to me, or you yelled at me, or you were really short, or Mom, I was on my way to the dishwasher to empty it when you nagged me about emptying it, right? So like, it just allows everybody to have a space so you can strike while the iron's cold, and not when everybody's super emotional, which means you find a way to get to solutions rather than just everybody bickering in the moment when all your kids are doing is just trying to run for cover. Yeah. And then we close out the meeting by setting up the next meeting, and that's that. It's 45 minutes. We're in, we're out, we're done. We'll often do it over, brunch on a Sunday morning. We've done it sometimes like quickie half hour, just hitting the highlights, sitting in a lounge in an airport. If we're coming back from vacation, it doesn't have to be formal, but it has to be regular, and everybody has to take part.
I love it. And I just want to echo what you said and say that I have no reason to believe that this wouldn't be just as valuable, just as effective if it was just me and my wife. Like the construct of this is really powerful. And one of the things that is, I know that I think you mentioned this, but that the grievances part, what's beautiful is things happen in the moment, and usually we react to them in the moment when the charge is really high.
Yes.
And that never goes well for me. I suspect it doesn't go well for others.
Or it doesn't go well for us or for the people that we're mad at or who are mad at us.
Exactly. And so by saving it and presenting it on, a separate time when things have calmed down, it's really a much healthier way, I think, to talk through these, have these difficult moments and have the, everyone's level of excitement about things be calm. So
Yes.
yeah.
And what's also interesting is that as my kids have gotten older, so yours are younger, but my kids are, cell phone age, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is so interesting is now something will happen and I'll literally see one of my kids pull their phone out, make a little note, and I'm like, oh, they're going to bring that up in family meeting. They're going to bring that up in family meeting. And what's so fascinating to me is that by the time we get to family meeting, they've also cooled down about it. So sometimes they don't even bring it up because they realize it was in the moment and it was unimportant. Or they do bring it up, but I've already cooled down about it, where when they say, Mom, you nagged me about this thing, I can say, yeah, you're right. I did. And I shouldn't have. And I'm sorry. I should have assumed the best. That's one of our family values. I should have assumed the best, that you were going to eventually unload the dishwasher like you said you would. But let me tell you why I was also already agitated about it, because there were these other 17 things that were happening in my life that I saw were happening in your life that I felt like weren't being taken care of. What's a better way for us to communicate about that next time so that I'm not privately agitating and you're not worrying that I'm about to swing the anvil? And then we get to have a conversation that we wouldn't have. We would never have that conversation in the moment. And so the way that conversations happen in the family meeting then infiltrates throughout the rest of the week in ways where I can say, this was something we discussed in family meeting and I'm working on it this way. I don't think it's working. Is there a better way to do it? And it just provides a structure. It provides shared language. It provides, it makes it obvious that we have shared goals and it's not them versus us. And to your point, I've had a lot of people who do it, who are just, couples who just do it. And it's super useful because, you would never run a company assuming that everybody in the division had the same ideas and the same goals and was on the same page, but we expect the people in our home to why would we expect that?
Yeah, totally
I love it. I love that you've been doing it, and I love that your kids are involved.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's definitely been a gift, and for anyone listening, I strongly encourage you to at least try it, because I think you'll really enjoy it. So, all right, can we talk a little bit about, I have been just really enjoying this beautiful book that you've created. And there's so many interesting ideas in it that I really didn't expect. And so I'd love to talk about some of them with you. The book is called Wonder Hell: Why Success Doesn't Feel Like It Should and What to Do About It. And I guess, let me just first ask you, what inspired you to focus on this idea?
Yeah, well, I was in Wonder Hell.
Okay.
So that's what inspired me. So when my last book, Limitless, came out, I honestly expected 3 people to buy it, my mother, my husband, maybe my father used from my mother. I had absolutely zero mailing list. I didn't really have much of a social media platform. And then it debuted at #2 on the Washington Post bestseller list. And I was shocked. I don't actually even know why. In fact, it may have, because Derek Coburn at Cadre might have bought a number of copies in DC, at the right moment on the right day. That may be the only reason why it happened. But because that happened, I then got asked to speak at a few big events. One of which I was opening for Malala, Malala. And another one I was opening for Robin Roberts, only because Malala had to go back to take finals at school, so she couldn't do the next event in this series of 3 events. Wow. Yeah, unbelievable. Robin sees the book, likes it, reads it, and tweets about it to her 5 million viewers or 5 million followers on the plane back to New York from Vancouver, where the event was. And suddenly I'm sitting on this red eye that next morning. It's 4 a.m. I can't fall asleep. I'm looking at my phone. I've got Washington Post bestseller right behind Michelle Obama, our pictures together. I have a selfie with Malala. I have Robin Roberts' tweet. And I'm like, what is my life? What's even happening here? And I had this moment where I couldn't sleep on this red eye flight. And I'm sandwiched in between these 2 former linebackers. And I just opened up my laptop and I wrote the screed of a post where I was just everybody says if you can name it, you can tame it. But I don't want to name it. I didn't even know I could do this. And now that I've done this, it's amazing. It's exciting. It's wonderful. I want to know what else I can do. It's exciting, but it's also anxiety provoking and exhausting. And stress inducing and identity questioning. It's wonderful, but it's kind of hell. It's wonder hell. And I've decided that I want to name it so I can claim it. Like, why not? Like, what does it feel like when you suddenly discover you have another gear inside of you that you didn't even know existed?
Yeah.
And you're so curious about it. And so I wrote this long screed of a post and I talked about it and I called it Wonder Hell. And a number of people were like, yes, I feel that. I know that. That's a great word. I've never had a word for that idea. Rohit, who's Rohit Bhargava, who is also a cadre member who published Limitless, was like, not for nothing, but that would make a great name for your next book. And suddenly I couldn't get this idea out of my head. And then the pandemic happened. And I spent a couple of years just doing interviews with people live streaming because I wanted to make content in the beginning for people that were safe at home. And every one of those conversations seemed to come back to the moment when everything changed for them. And I was talking to Olympic medalists, startup unicorns. I was talking to just first of, badasses. And every single one of them, this moment where everything changed was the same moment of realizing that there was something more inside of them and grappling with the excitement, but also the sort of tsunami of uncertainty and anxiety and imposter syndrome and doubt and burnout at the same time. And so once I had sort of done a series of about 100 of these interviews, I was like, there's you got to be pretty dumb not to realize there's kind of a theme that's going through this. And the theme was that each one of them had to figure out how to renegotiate their relationship with all of these emotions so that they could become the thing that they secretly knew was inside of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely true. As soon as I started reading this book, I was like 100%. And it's every level of new success is also daunting because the thing you always wanted is now real. And now that that's the new baseline, first you have to figure out how to show up in the best way for it. And now you're looking at a whole new world of possibilities. And so it's a beautiful concept. What in all these interviews that you've done, was there anything that was in particular surprising that you didn't expect to learn about the kind of the success process that people went through? Like what are the most surprising lessons that you feel like you've learned?
I think the most surprising lesson is that every single one of these people, whether they are literally starting their second $1 billion company, right? That's a great sentence, our second $1 billion company, or they're at the top of the ski slope waiting for their gold medal run when they literally have a gold medal from the last one in their pocket already, right? Every single one of these people still dealt with the same stuff that you and I deal with. So it doesn't actually matter because every single time you get to that new level, there is that new devil. And what surprised me the most was that it never goes away. So I thought you get to a certain place and you no longer have doubt. You no longer have uncertainty. You no longer have anxiety. You no longer have imposter syndrome. But it turns out that when when yesterday's ceiling is tomorrow's floor, you're always in a new room. And so, of course, you're going to feel differently. And, maybe there are a handful of people like Richard Branson or Barack Obama or, Malala, right? Or somebody who they're in a room and they're like, yes, I belong here. But I think for the most part, it felt to me both horrifying and also liberating to know that all of these feelings are just normal. Like every single one of them are normal. And it's not that I'm a bad person for having them or that I'm wrong or less than for having these feelings. It's actually the complete opposite, that I'm on the right track. Like the fact that I feel this way, that I feel uncertain and full of doubt and imposter syndrome means that I'm at a place that I haven't been to before. So isn't that exciting? And the thing, the thing that I thought was most interesting is that of all of these people who I spoke with, they did not let this voice inside their head become a limitation, but they saw it as an invitation. Like, good job, pat yourself on the back. You're actually on the right track. And I think just not having all the unnecessary heat loss, the stress around the stress, just freed them up so much to be able to capitalize on all the possibility that was out in front of them.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So then I would suspect, is it your experience that it's true that I think we do project a lot on people that we see in the world that are successful. And it sounds like, based on the work that you've done here, that your experiences is that we're projecting something that's very different from their lived experience, which is much more like our lived experience. They're just handling it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I like to say is that all of the people who you admire are all having the same exact fights with their family. They're just doing them in nicer cars and private jets. But they are exactly the same humans. In fact, I spoke to Sally Krawcheck, who is the founder of Elevest, which is a $2 billion investment platform by women for women. And Sally has the dishonor of being the only person to be fired, not just once, but twice, and both times on the cover of the Wall Street Journal from massive Wall Street banks. She says because she was a woman, not because she has, lady parts, but because she thinks differently than like the fast and loose boys in Wall Street who were like, who didn't care about risk and were like, go big or go home and let's crush the lines at the gate kind of thing. Whereas she, as a woman, was thinking about sort of long range, risk aversion. She could put herself in the shoes of her female investors. And when she would bring these things up in the boardroom, of course, the men didn't like it because she was slowing them down. And so she one day thought like, well, what if there could be a platform for women by women who thought about this? Because women live longer. We retire later. We're encouraged less to invest. We have less savings. Like the retirement savings crisis, a women's crisis. I've got to solve this. And what I thought was two things I thought were very interesting about my interview with Sally was that, number one, she felt all of the same imposter syndrome and uncertainty, like someone's got to do it. Who can it be? Oh my God, it's got to be me. She had to do it. But number two, she also said at the same time, I'm managing, 2 kids, 2 cats, a couple stepkids, a husband. Like she's got a busy home life. She said to me something that not a lot of women will say out loud. She said to me, I just decided I'd just be average at home. I didn't have to be the world's best mother and wife and sister and daughter and cat mom in every single moment of every single day. I could just be Sally. And allowing herself to just be Sally in these moments that weren't like the high stakes parenting moments, just like the sort of everyday moments, allowed her to crush it at work. And so there's this sort of interesting idea that even as we're trying to find new parts of ourselves and invest even deeper and grow even more, we don't have to do it on all the fronts at the same time. And I think it's a good lesson to take.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you have to pick your moments and dive in fully. So, all right, very interesting. So one thing that I noticed that you mentioned in this book is you reference back to your first book.
Yes.
And in it, you described a concept that honestly I'd never heard before this, which you called consonants. And in the book, you described 4 elements. Could you just talk a little bit about that and describe it for anyone listening?
So I spent 20 years doing executive search. It was my job to call the most successful people on the planet and recruit them away on behalf of my clients. And it sounds like kind of a hard job, except that I was helped by the fact that there are about 8 motivating factors that inspire anybody at any time to take a new job. And there are things like, am I inspired by the leadership of the organization? What's the mission? How many skills am I going to learn? How broad is the impact? What's the rate of change? Where is it located? What are the benefits? How much money am I going to make? Right? There are all sorts of things, and we're all given that list when we're in high school or college. What makes a good job good? But they leave out the important piece of it, which is that we need to prioritize it for us in whatever moment we're in our lives. They leave out the what makes the good job good for you. So that when I was much younger, I didn't care as much about how much money I was going to make. I cared about, was I inspired? How prestigious will this job look on my resume? What kinds of skills am I going to have? Like, what is this? How is this going to affect my career trajectory? Right? Then you get into your 30s and you're like, I'm in my earning years. I'm worried about the money, right? You get into your 40s. I want to spend more time, with the kids that are growing. Like, the things that we want in our job will change, and what makes a good job good for us at any given moment, every sort of 7 to 10 years changes. And what I realized was that I was calling people who were at the top of their game. Like they should have been full of purpose and happy and amazing and not wanting to return my calls. But I would call these super successful people because they were super successful, but none of them were very happy. So they all called me back. And I was so fascinated by this question that when I sold my executive search firm to the team of women who helped me build it, I started to think about the handful of people who I wasn't able to recruit away, along with my own career and the changes that I had made at different times. And what I realized was that these people had success, but they didn't have consonance, right? This alignment, this flow, when what we are matches, or what we do matches who we are. You've heard dissonance, right? Dissonance is like that's a word we all know. It's cacophony, it's noise, it's a sort of organ failure rejection that you get when things don't work out. But consonance is the opposite. And consonance, what I realized, is made up of 4 specific things: calling, connection, contribution, and control. Because, I write personal development. So of course, they've all got to start with the C. So calling. What is the gravitational force that gets you out of bed in the morning? Like the thing that you want to do, the leader who inspires you, the business that you want to build, the family you want to nurture, the cause that you want to serve. Like, what is that calling? What's that purpose? Number 1. Number 2, connection. How much does what's in your calendar, your inbox, your to-do list actually relate to that calling you just identified? Does your work actually matter? Does the stuff you're doing on a daily basis get you closer to or further from your calling? Yeah. Number 3, contribution. Our work should contribute something to our lives, right? Connection's all about the work. Contribution's really all about you. So how is this work contributing to your career trajectory? How is it contributing to the lifestyle you'd like to live, the flexibility you'd like to have, the values that you want to manifest on a daily basis? How does this work contribute to the life that you'd like to have? And then lastly, control. Control really talking about how I've got, a son who, or right when we started, we were talking about how I've got, kids about to go to college. So right now, what's my calling? My calling is being a mom. Like these 6 weeks right now, I am 100% focused. There's nothing that I'm doing that connects, in terms of my work that connects to that. So like I'm taking advantage of August, right? I'm allowing myself to, enjoy this time. So I sort of go through, every probably once a quarter or so right now, because my life is sort of in rapid change moments. But I think for most people, it's like every 3 to 5 years to sort of sit down and think about how much calling do you have? How much connection do you have? How much contribution do you have? And how much control do you have? And how much of each do you want? Because if you actually don't care how much your work connects, like you just want to go and flip burgers and come home and like be there for your family, amazing. You don't need to have any connection. So you're totally in consonance with that, right? So we all have to figure out how much of each we want and need, knowing that at every age and at every stage, it's going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's a lot. I know.
No, it is, but it's beautiful. I guess I wondered, did you find any themes? So I very much can see and feel how radically different it might be from one stage to the next. When you were interviewing CEOs and people who have, quote, made it, right? Did you see any patterns with relationship to these qualities? Did you see that one tended to be more important for them?
Well, it's funny. I didn't think through my Wonder Hell interviews in terms of consonants. And I should. It's a very good question. But rather than making it up on the fly right now and trying to come up with the answers, what I will tell you is what I did do is when Limitless came out, I had an assessment I put online. It's actually still there at limitlessassessment.com. And it's a 67 question assessment. It's pretty in depth. And I ran it for from January 2019 and all the way through present. But about 6 months ago, I put together all the results from it. And so I had 3 years of results from 67 questions. So I have almost 6,000 results from 74 different countries from before, during, and after the pandemic across every possible demographic you can imagine. And here's what I can tell you, that every generation from, Gen Z all the way to boomers wants purpose in their work. Whether they are working in for-profit and nonprofit, in the public sector, they want purpose in their work. Every person would work harder if they believed in their boss, if they appreciated their boss, if they respected their boss. And most workers, under 50% across women, across every generation, across, every sector, across every type of position, because there's, about 12 demographic questions at the end of the quiz, also says, I don't respect my boss. I don't want to work harder for my boss, right? And so there were a number of questions in there that allow me to get to this answer. We think that that workers are failing leaders, but in fact, it's leaders who are failing workers, because the workers say, even if I think I have a good leader, right? Like I rate my leader as a good leader. And we know that if you have a good leader, you're likely to keep your team, right? And if you're a bad leader, you're likely to lose your team. But it turns out that if your team says, my leader's a good leader,
So they're all at some level integrated, and I mean honestly, like I would say that my incredible wife, I think, would probably agree with that. So that's that's really amazing.
Yeah, I have like a 20, 30, I can't even remember, page white paper on it. And I wrote about it for Harvard Business Review. And there were a lot of results that came out of it. And I have a version of my keynote that I give, the Limitless Leader keynote, but I can send you the link to the report and you can put it in show notes or anything if people want to see more about it or take the quiz or any of that.
That would be perfect. Yes, definitely. Let's link it into the show notes. Thank you. All right. So in the book, you described there are 3 ways through Wonder Hell. You talked about embracing your ambition.
Yes.
And the burden of your potential, which you mentioned, renegotiating your relationship with mixed emotions, which is what you were describing earlier, and then doing it again and again and again. Embrace that it's going on forever, or will it continue through each stage?
Yes. Yes.
Is there anything else that you would add to that came out to you, or that people listening should understand about those 3?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are sold this idea that once we're successful, we'll be happy, right? It's all you need to do is be successful, and then everything's going to be great. Easy money. It's just going to be simple. You just get through this one stomach churning, butt clenching fight or flight moment, and it's going to be great. And on the other side of this one stomach churning, butt clenching fight or flight moment is just the next one and the next one and the next one after that. And so I did not write a book that's saying to people like, get hard and, crush it and, lean in. I don't want people to think this book is telling you like that you just got to keep growing and growing and growing. And, it's what I wanted people to feel when they read this book is first seen, right? Like we're all feeling this way. Like even if on the outside, people look like they're crushing it, every single one of us is filled with uncertainty. But that because we have been told by, like the sort of success industrial complex that we'll feel better when we get to success. That just makes us feel badly each time we get there, and we're like, oh, I guess there must be other success that's ahead and I'm just not enough yet, right? So I want people to be able to read this book and say, there are so many different ways that I can be successful. There are ways that I can be successful at different times in my career, different paths that I'm taking. There's all sorts of different models of different people who, here's how this person dealt with perfectionism. Here's how this person dealt with insecurity. Here's how this person dealt with, imposter syndrome. So what I want people to leave this book feeling is that wherever they are in the process is the right place for them to be in the process. And that it's up to them how much they either want to do or not do to get to the next place. Because I also think, there's a part in the book where I talk about burnout, where I say, like, it's actually okay if you don't want to climb the next mountain just yet. Like, you may have other priorities, right? Like Sally could have easily said, I don't want to build Elevest right now. I want to be a, out of the park success mom, and I just want to be average at work for a little while, right? So like, there are different moments in our life where we can decide to do different, we can dial up or dial down different pieces of it.
Totally. And we need rest. We need rest. We need time to decompress, to reset, to do what you described earlier, which is just look around and like, where am I? What where do I want to go from here? It's funny, in the book there was a part where you talked about I think it was Michelle 100 Days Without Fear, this
Yes.
woman who basically did this challenge and did something that she was afraid of for 100 days. And I remember you talked about the difference between extroversion and introversion and luck. And I thought that was really interesting. I'm curious as to anything you want to say about that, but what do you believe about luck? What role does it play, and how real is it?
So I have always been curious about luck. And I've been curious about luck both professionally, because I see a lot of people around me who have opportunities where I'm like, why did they get that? Like, God, they're lucky, right? Like, what does that mean when I say someone's lucky? And I have a sister whose name is Karen, and she has always been one of those people who just seems naturally lucky. Like, there's an expression in our house, here comes Karen. Like, I could go up to the maitre d' at a restaurant and say, like, hi, is there a table available? And they're like, no, we're booked for 3 months. 5 minutes later, my sister can walk up and literally people right there have just stood up from their table. Hi, is there a table available? Well, yes, we just have a table right now. And we're like, here comes Karen. It's just like, life just works for her in this way that I'm like, why is that? Now, I'm an introvert. My sister is an extrovert. And so as I started to read about luck, I started to notice that a lot of the things that people do to make themselves lucky felt a lot like extroversion to me. And so I had a choice to make. Do I either say, oh, well, extroverts are just lucky and introverts aren't? That's not for me. Or is there a way that I can reverse engineer luck a little bit? And so I did a lot of reading about luck. I got my PhD in luck, right? I was like, how do people go through life and are just magically blessed? And what is this manifestation thing anyway? And what I learned is that there are things that people do to make themselves lucky, right? There are things that people do. And those things are things like they show up more, they extrovert more, they ask for more, they say yes to the opportunity, they go to the event, right? They sort of put themselves in a place where people think about them. They're in the deal flow. They are top of mind. So it's not that somebody just gets tapped because they happen to be lucky and they get tapped for the opportunity. They put themselves in a place where the person remembers that they're there. This ties into manifestation in that we think if we just like write on like pretty scrolly, glitter paper that we want to go to Japan, for example, that we're going to magically get to go to Japan. But you're not manifesting a sale on flights to Japan. What you're doing is you're telling your brain, which can only take in your brain, which gets 11 million bits of data every single second. Like 11 million bits every single second is a lot of information. Like, what is the sound of my voice? What word might be coming next? How cold is it in the room? How does the sweater feel on my arm, right? There's so many pieces of data that we're getting, but your brain can only process 50. So you get 11 million bits every second. Your brain can process 50. That's not giving it a fighting chance. But if you put on your vision board in scrolly glittery letters, I want to go to Japan. Suddenly a bus drives by with a sale on flights to Japan. You didn't manifest the bus. You just told your brain, out of the 11 million bits of data, this is one of the 50 I want you to pluck out. And so suddenly there's a sale on a flight to Japan. And so when you are extroverting yourself, when you are doing the things that lucky people do, having more optimism, turning a negative into a positive by saying that's a learning experience and not just a reason for me to go to ground, like all the things that people do as extroverts, it turns out that that puts you top of mind. You're basically putting yourself on somebody else's vision board, right? So that they remember that you exist. And so Michelle Poler did is she did all of these things. She made herself, she is an introvert and she was riddled with anxiety. And what she did is she was like, if I can just be a situational luck tourist, if I can put myself out there, if I can assume good things are going to happen, if I can put myself in the deal flow, if I allow myself to show up and turn up and take all the scary and the uncertainty and the negativity and turn it into learning opportunities, it allowed her to just suddenly be so filled with opportunity and possibility that she became, quote unquote, luckier, right? So she made herself lucky. And again, as I said in the beginning, I'm a raging introvert. Like I could talk to you all day, but if you put me in a room with like 20 people, even I'll curl up in fetal position. Like it's like, that's awful. But I can act like a situational luck tourist when I need to. So I go to an event, I do the thing, the razzmatazz, like I do my, on stage and I shake the hands and then I go home and I curl up in a ball then, but I know that I need to act like a lucky person does in order to become a lucky person.
That's a wonderful insight. And it's true. I mean, sitting here talking to you, if you asked me, am I an introvert or an extrovert? I would guess extrovert because, and have particularly having seen you speak in front of people and looking very comfortable. So I think that's inspiring to anyone who is questioning themselves, or questioning what they can and can't achieve or, the ways they can show up. So, and I appreciate you covering the manifestation thing too, because it's always a little weird. Like, what is this really, and how does it actually work? But it's the same way that when you go to look at a car, all of a sudden you buy a car, you see the car everywhere. It's like, just
exactly.
training your mind to focus on the right things. Right?
Exactly. I've always thought manifestation was complete bullshit. I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to put that on your vision board and something's going to happen. You're going to manifest your perfect life partner. It's like, no, you don't. But it is. I'm sure that you have had a lot of people who have said that having a rich life is living a life with intentionality, right? So intentionality, who am I with? Where am I with them? How am I with them? Like, how am I going through life in this intentional way? Manifestation is exactly that. Like you are not manifesting, but you're being intentional so that you notice the opportunities when they're like, aren't there people in your life where you're like, I can't believe they don't see the opportunity right in front of their face? Right? Like you look at them and you're like, how are they not grabbing that? It's like low hanging fruit. It's easy money. What are they doing? Like, why aren't they doing it? They don't see it. It's not that they see it and they're ignoring it. It's just not one of the 11 million bits of data that their brain is even noticing. And so you may be noticing it because it's an opportunity that you're thinking about, but they just don't. It's not that they ignore. It's not that they're ignoring it on purpose. They literally just not even register.
Yeah. So the actual process of sitting down and documenting, this is what I want, this in life, this is what's meaningful, this is my vision. It is valuable, but not for the reasons people might think. It's valuable because you're allowing yourself to orient your attention towards the things that are matter, and then you're observing them everywhere that they are instead of letting them pass by.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's like, in coaching, right? I don't know that I'm any great genius of a coach. But one of the first things I do when I'm working with a client is I ask them to tell me what success looks like for them. What do they want? How do they want to spend their days, their months, their years? Who do they want to spend it with? What opportunities do they want? What would complete, unfettered, unbridled, unapologetic success look like at home, at work, in their family, in their community, in their country? And I make them write these things out. And not just like, I want to go on a lot of vacations, but like, where do I want to stay on the vacations? 2-star, 5-star, right? Am I renting a car? Am I flying in a private jet? Like, what do they want it to look like? And I think the process of them going through and being really specific about how they want to be in their life, all I'm doing is I'm just turning up the volume on them noticing the goodness that's mostly already there.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. On this same vein, you talk about in the book, like the process of understanding your true self, basically finding your true self. What have you learned about that process? Because it is, I think it's a little bit elusive for many people. What have you discovered?
About discovering my true self?
Yeah, about discovering your true self, or the process of a person discovering their true self.
Well, I think the answer is probably the same for both of those, actually.
Right.
Which is, most of us think we know who our true self is because we are quote unquote good when the people who are around us think we're good, right? And that means the parents you grew up with, the teachers who gave you grades, your boss, right? Like people who are in your life whose opinions that you take. And the problem is that we're giving votes in our lives to people who shouldn't even have voices. I love my parents. God bless them. They're wonderful humans. They gave me an incredible life. But they are not the people who should be giving an opinion about whether or not my life is a good life right now. I'm 52 years old, right? Like I have a very different set of expectations and desires, wants, needs than they had for themselves. I think I spent a lot of my early years, like a lot of kids do, living out the life that their parents wished that they'd had, right? Like it's a lot of things that happen. And so when I told my parents I was dropping out of law school to join a presidential campaign, when I told them I was leaving the White House to start my own, to go into executive search, like, what's that? When I told them I was leaving that big search firm to start my own firm, like, what are you, crazy? Like, entrepreneurship, you're going to fail. When I told them I was selling that company that was super successful, that I could have just ridden off into the sunset, but they thought I was insane for doing that. So it's not that they don't love me. It's not that they don't want the best for me, but I don't think my parents know me, right? They don't know me. They don't know what I'm capable of. The last time I lived in their same house, I was 17 years old and I didn't have a full frontal lobe. I was not making good decisions. I would not have been a good member of the family meeting, but we still listen to a lot of the people who are the closest to us, either in proximity or by blood relation, as if they are the ones who know us best, when in fact, they're often the ones who know us least. They have an idea of who they think we should be based on who we were 5 years, 10 years, 30 years ago. They don't really know us. And so I think the process of finding our true selves often starts with figuring out who really should have an opinion around us. There's an idea in psychology that's like 100-year-old idea that's about it's the reflected self theory. That's not the exact right word, but I've forgotten in this moment what it is. The idea behind it is this, though. We are not who we think we are, and we're not who others think we are. We're who we think others think we are. And so when we stop and try to figure out who we are, and we're only thinking about ourselves that way, again, we're not who we think we are. We're not who others think we are. We're who we think others think we are. So if we're reflecting ourselves through what we think others think about us, we're always going to think, I'm not enough, I'm less than, maybe I'm too much, maybe I'm better than I am, right? We don't have a great guide of who we actually what was going on with me. The whole time my skin was basically eating my body from the outside in, which is a graphic image that is, I assure you, not worse than reality.
Yeah.
And then another month to figure out how to find some doctor to give me an off-label use of a failed chemotherapy drug through IV infusion for 10 months to put me in remission, whatever remission means for a disease that 800 people in the entirety of the United States have ever had. So, there were a good 6 months where I was not sure that I'd see 2022, and where I laid in bed at night thinking through the videos that I'd make for my children for all those big moments in time that I was not going to be there. High school graduation, college graduation, getting married, first children, all of that stuff. And I'll tell you, man, if that's not clarifying, I don't know what is.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that so vulnerably. And I guess
I can do it now because I'm fine.
Yeah.
But
yes.
I don't. Yeah, it's less vulnerable when you're in remission.
Right.
If you're in the middle of it, but it's also, will it ever come back? If it does, you can't do the same drug because you become allergic to it. There's a whole level of preciousness to time that I did not feel as exquisitely before this. And so, when you asked me the question in the beginning about what does it mean to live a rich life, I mean, it's, emphasis on live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Live and live well.
Yes.
How would you characterize what that experience has taught you for anyone who might not be taking that possibility seriously, or might not be able to connect with that level of clarity that came from that? I mean, is there anything that you could offer to other folks that might be, might benefit from?
Yeah. I mean, it's all, as much as I hate to say it, it's all the trite bullshit that we hear all the time. Like, tomorrow is not promised, and live for the moment, and let the little shit go. Like, it's all of that. And it's all the same stuff that before this happened to me, I would not have listened to anyway. So I don't know that anyone would listen. But let me say this, because I feel like this is probably more relatable. You have a very limited amount of time left with your kids. Like, the most amount of time that you're going to spend with your kids is this time right now when they're in the house, your 6 and your 8-year-old. And now I'm at the end of that tunnel. Like, I will spend less time probably with my kids from now until the time I die than the time that I've spent with them in the last 20 years, right? If you add up all the minutes and the hours, this is I'm more than halfway. And what I have taken, if anything, that I could pass along would be always say yes. So when my 16-year-old who just got his driver's license comes downstairs and says, "Mom, you want to go somewhere?" I don't say, "Where do you want to go? What should we do?" And then spend a half hour talking about it till finally he's like, "You know what? Never mind." I just say yes. He's like, "Where should we go?" I'm like, "I don't know. Let's get in the car and figure it out." Like, I get in the car. I'm like, once we're in the car, we could just spend a half hour or an hour or 3 hours just driving. It doesn't actually matter. Like, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
It's just the time. And frankly, windshield time is the best time ever with 16-year-olds. So now that they're 19 and they're 21, like, I say to my husband all the time, I'm like, if they come down before the sentence is even out of their mouth, the answer is yes. So obviously you say no to things like, you want to go do crack cocaine, right? Like, you're not going to say yes to everything. But, the answer is like, yes, like, let's go. We'll figure it out later. And so I think that, to me, I think the combination of the sickness and the sort of sands through the hourglass of like the time I spent with my kids has the biggest lesson that has come from it is just, you're never too tired for your kids. Always say yes, like, just all in, you'll figure it out later.
Oh, thank you. I needed that. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, and I feel so guilty every time. My son would just play games with me for hours and hours and hours, and I want very much to. I've been reflecting on that a lot recently, and I think I'm actually going to start to turn our internet off for certain hours of the day and just have it scheduled and just be fully immersed in them, because I know what you say is true, and I could also continue to act like it's not, and I don't want that.
What are you pretending not to know? Right.
Exactly. Right.
I'm pretending not to know that this time is going to come to an end. The funniest thing is that I think my kids actually teach me this more than I do it. My youngest son is a Swiftie, and I was trying to get tickets for Taylor Swift, trying miserably and failing. And I posted something on Facebook, like, I'm 99,999th in line. Like, I live here now. And a friend of mine in LA sends me a text and he said, well, we got 6 tickets to the last night of the US tour. We only need 4. You want to take the other face value off our hands? And I was like, yes, mother of the year. Thank you very much. So my son and I went to LA just last week for the end of the concert. And because we were so worried about travel, we decided to get to California a couple days in advance, right? As opposed to, like, we'll go to the concert and then spend the weekend. We'll go a couple days in advance. God forbid the flight gets canceled. I'll get to the concert. So we fly out, we spend a couple days in Santa Barbara before the concert. My son says to me before dinner the first night, I'm just going to leave my phone in the room. Oh, okay. He leaves his phone in the room. I have my phone at dinner. And I got to tell you, every time I reached down to pick up my phone, I felt guilty. Like, that impulse of, like, checking it every couple of minutes, every 30 seconds, every 5 minutes. I want to take a picture of the food, of the sunset, or whatever. He was just like, no. He's like, don't. He's like, don't. He goes, leave it in your pocket. And then, so I did. And it was really hard. And the next morning we're going to breakfast. He goes, I'm going to leave my phone in the room all day today. And I was like, you're going to what? So he challenged me to do the same thing. And we spent the entire day without our phones, like, just like animals. We were just like cavemen. We were just out there. And it was so great. And we were pleasant and we were present. And it was just super enjoyable. So I love this idea of you turning off the internet, especially because your kids are so young right now that they're just going to grow up thinking it's normal. Like, this is just what happens in a house. Like, your internet's on at these times, it's not on at these times. And you won't even get pushback. Like, they're just going to think that that's just how it works.
Totally.
Brilliant.
And I think there's actually, I remember reading in one of the chapters that you talked about, like, when people say I'm too busy, quote unquote.
Yeah, busy's bullshit.
And that's bullshit, right? So I'd love maybe just for you to talk about that for 1 second. But the feeling I've had is, the realization I've had is, if I just were to cut, like, what do I need to eliminate to create space for all sorts of things that I want that are more important, right? Like, just by eliminating, if I turned off the internet in the evenings, I would have more time for walks at night, for reading, for playing games, for connection, for planning for the next day. Like, all of these things that I want that are truly more important become so much more possible. So anyway, I appreciate that part. So what do you think? Why do you think I'm too busy is bullshit?
Because every time somebody tells me I'm too busy, what I hear is, it's just not that important to me. Yeah. Right? Like, if you wanted to go on walks in the evenings, you would. You just would. You wouldn't scroll Instagram. Like, you wouldn't look at TikTok. You just would. If you wanted to play games with your kids all night, you just would. Now, I'm not saying that as, like, you don't want to play games with your kids. What I'm saying is, like, it is so painful the day that your kid realizes that they can tell jokes and they're like, knock, knock. And you're like, who's there? And they're like, stapler.
Yeah.
Ha, 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 ha. And you're like, oh my God, kill me now. Right? Like, it takes like 45 minutes for them to get a joke out. Like, it's exhausting after a long day of work. So, like, you don't have to, like, yeah, you want to play games forever, but, like, it's not that you're too busy. It's not that you just don't want to. You want a little bit of time for yourself too. And that's okay. But when somebody's like, oh, I wish I could run a marathon, I'm just too busy to train. It's like, you're not too busy. You're just prioritizing something else. And that's okay. And I think we have, again, I mentioned the success industrial complex earlier. Like, there are a lot of people who put goals on the wall as these, like, look good goals. Like, I put them on the wall and they look good to somebody else. I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to, gain more muscle. I'm going to read a book every week. I'm going to, meal prep, whatever. Who cares? What are the things you actually care about? Like, if your goal is to rewatch all of The West Wing or to watch every single Real Housewives, franchise, great, awesome. You can tell me that that's what you want to do, but don't tell me you're too busy to run a marathon when you're spending 3 hours on the couch every night, right? Like, I'm not trying to harsh on people that have different goals. I'm saying, awesome. Like, I love your goals. Like, we should all have whatever the hell goals we want, but we should stop telling ourselves that we're too busy, and we should just start loving and owning it. Because if my goal is to watch every single franchise of the Real Housewives, I should enjoy the hell out of it and not feel guilty about doing it. Like we should just allow ourselves to enjoy the goals we have. That's all I'm saying.
Right. The irony of actually doing the thing and then feeling guilty the whole time. So you've mentioned this a few times, and in the book you talk about hustle porn.
Yeah.
And it really is true that that there is just an unbelievable amount of information coming in that tells us we have to optimize and reprioritize and maximize every minute of every day. And earlier you mentioned the woman Rahaf Harfouche.
Yes.
And you talk about her book, Hustle and Float. And one of the findings that I remember she describes is that it's actually true that if you work 12 to 14 hours a day, like we're told in some places that we should try to, it becomes less productive. And that the amount of work is really thoughtful work is more like 6 hours. That's optimal.
Yes.
And so I wonder from your perspective, what have you found to be true? I know you coach people, how would you invite people to think about this dynamic, given that there's so much information that pushes us in the other direction?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that you should do what works best for you, right? Like if you're not a morning person, you don't want a miracle morning. Maybe you want a miracle evening, right? Like Rahaf is my work wife. She and I speak every single Tuesday morning. We spoke this morning. She's a Syrian-born Canadian who lives in a farm outside of Lyon in France. Like they just decided that this is the life that they're going to have. And they moved to France at the beginning of the pandemic. We speak every single Tuesday morning, my time, because I'm a morning person. But it's 2:00 in the afternoon her time because she's a night person. So when I talk about all the things I get done before 8 a.m., she's like, you're insane. I would start those things at 8 p.m. Right. So we talk, I'm on the treadmill, she's on her treadmill, but I'm getting my morning workout in. She would never work out in the morning because she's just not her thing. But I think all of this sort of success, the hustle porn that we see tells you you got to get up, you got to eat the frog first. Successful people get up at 5 a.m., but uber successful people get up at 3 a.m., right? It's just nonsense. What works for you? Maybe your body feels best when you're on a keto diet. Maybe your body feels best when you're vegan. Maybe your body feels best when it's Mediterranean. I don't know. We're all different humans, just like we all have different goals. What's going to work best for you? So for me, I like to get up first thing in the morning and I row or I run. Then I take a bath. I have my green tea. I sit down for 3 hours and I'm creative. I write, I create my keynotes. I write my blog posts, my newsletters. I rehearse my keynotes, whatever the things are. And then at noon, I start taking external meetings. So I do podcast recordings, or I do coaching calls, or I do the pre-calls with my clients, whatever the things are that I need to do. And as the day goes on, the mental load that I need to bring forward is less needed, right? So by the end of the day, by 4 p.m., by 5 p.m., it's pretty tough. So those are the pick your brain meetings where somebody's calling me and they're asking me for advice on something I've been thinking about for 30 years. I don't have to be the top of my game, right? So I'm not going to have a keynote at 5 p.m. That's exhausting. The keynote that you saw me do was late in the day. You may remember it was rough. So, what I want people to be able to take from this is to think about who they are when they are at their very best, right? Harvard Business Review had an article about this 10 years ago called The Fundamental State of Leadership. Who are you when you're at your very best? You're crushing it. You are just on fire. You're wooing the girl, you're selling the big client, you're crushing the presentation. Or maybe you're helping a loved one through a moment of need, or a colleague through a struggle, right? It could be loud, it could be quiet, it could be public, it could be private. All that matters is it's who you are when you're at your best. And then think about what time of day you are often in that role. What energy are you using? What muscles are you using? What words are you using? Where are you in your body, in your space? Where are you physically? And if you can try to recreate that more often, intentionally, then that becomes the person who you fall back to, even when you're not intentionally thinking about it. And so when Rahaf and I talk about it, she calls it humane productivity, right? How do you be as productive as you possibly can, but in a way that is really humane and kind to yourself so that you can do it over a long period of time? And this working 14 to 16-hour days is not only not humane, it's also not productive, right? So you can only be productive for a certain amount of time. And the last thing I'll say is, we talked about rest earlier, Rahaf's book, her last book is called Hustle and Float. And it's all around this idea that we have to hustle, 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 hustle. But if we keep hustling, all we'll do is get burnt out. We need those periods of float in between. It's based on whitewater rafting, where like if you're just like hustling the whole time, it's exhausting and it's actually not that fun. And if you're floating the whole time, it's boring and it's not that fun. But if you have like periods of hustle and periods of float, it's actually pretty nice because you can hustle, hustle, hustle. And then you could spend the floating time sort of thinking and alchemizing everything that you thought about during the hustle, so that when it's time to hustle again, you're rested and you're ready to go. And our brains work exactly the same way. Like we don't, I can only, I don't have the best ideas in the shower. It's like, no, that's the only place where you're not looking at 17 different devices and you're listening to 6 different podcasts, and like your brain actually can stop and think and alchemize and come up with like, and here's the one gem of an idea that comes out of it.
Yeah. I love that metaphor, hustle and float. And it's so true. I mean, I really agree with the idea that, how you feel and paying attention to how you feel is a better way, a better path to realizing what the appropriate schedule would be than I think what so oftentimes we do is we try to think I'm trying to think through everything, and really we should feel more.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
So one other just thing that towards the end of the book that I wanted to ask you about is, you describe how we measure success, and you talked about changing the measurement of success from how much you have to how many people you can help, as a way to shift away from what we've been talking about a little bit, which is the hedonic treadmill, right? Which is more, and make peace with wonder hell. So, I think you tell a story about, Marshall Goldsmith. I know you're part of that group. If you wanted to expand on there, or if you just wanted to share, like, what are your thoughts about that shift? And is that an important shift to make at any stage, even if you're just getting started, or is that something that comes later, or what's your take?
I've always thought that, the third book that I would write would be about legacy building, because, the first sort of Limitless is about how do we create a definition of success that matters to us. And then Wonder Hell is, now that we have this definition of success, as we start to achieve it, suddenly the stakes are higher. Oh no, now it's a little stressful. And then the last book would sort of be about this legacy building, because I figured that's sort of where I'd be in the arc of my career. And I did interview Marshall Goldsmith for it. And Marshall is, an old man at this point. He will say that himself. And he at one point realized that he had enough. He had enough friends. He had enough accomplishments. He had enough bestsellers. He has enough money. He has enough love. Right? What he can do now is he can now teach what he knows to other people. And it, for him, became not about how much he had, but how many he could help. And what I realized in sort of the writing of the book and sort of starting to think about the next book is that one of the best ways that we can get rid of uncertainty and doubt and anxiety and imposter syndrome at any point in our life is to actually mentor somebody else. Because when we teach somebody something we know, it teaches us, it reminds us that we actually know things, that we actually belong, that we're not imposters, that we belong in the room that we're in. And so I really do think this question of constantly coming back to how many we can help is probably a pretty great career and just sort of self-awareness builder throughout every stage of our life. And so it's probably what I'm going to start thinking about in the next book, is interviewing people who have thought about that question from a much earlier stage and how that manifested in their sort of personal and career trajectory.
I love that. I actually my wife and I went to a retreat this weekend, and I was thinking about like, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a map that shows if you go back 400 years, it takes something like 4,000 ancestors to have lived and, created new future generations for you to exist. And I love the idea that, we in this generation are probably the most updated version of what humanity can be from a natural perspective, right? Our DNA and so forth. And we have the opportunity to add and contribute to the future of humanity in a meaningful and positive way, or not. And that there's a lot of process there, but it's a bigger, more meta question that I think it relates to what you're talking about, which is ultimately like, how much can we contribute in the end? Because
yes, because that makes a rich life.
It does. It does. Well, I just want to say for anyone listening, this book, I mean, we've touched on a little bit of it, but there's so much more. And what I love about the way you wrote it is actually something where you can pick it up and just read one chapter, and that chapter is incredibly meaningful in and of itself. So anyway, I'm just so happy to have read it, and I really appreciate you putting so much time and effort into it. I guess the last question, what are you most excited about now? You said you might write another book. Is there anything else that you have on your radar that you're excited about?
I'm just really excited about looking over, like peeking over the edge of what I didn't know was possible when I wrote the book about finding parts of ourselves that we didn't know were possible, and just seeing what's out there. It's introduced me to a lot more interesting people, a lot more interesting opportunities, a lot more interesting things.
Beautiful. Well, where can people learn more about you if they wanted to check you out?
Yeah, so all my good friends call me LGO. I'm at Hey LGO on all the socials, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, TikTok, everywhere. And if they're interested in learning more about where they are in Wonderhell, they can actually go to wonderhellquiz.com, and they can take a very short quiz and figure out where in the Wonderhell Carnival they are and what they can do right now, today, to help get themselves out of it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, LGO. It has been such a gift, and I really enjoyed our time together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. I'm Nathan Hurd, also known as The Rich Life Guy. You can follow me at The Rich Life Guy. Also check out Rich Life Lab, which is the podcast available everywhere. And leave a comment and let me know if this video landed for you or what else you'd like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.